Hello, today is Good Friday, and on this Good Friday, it is a day where we as Christians take the time to remember that Jesus laid down his life and he died on a cross outside the city walls of Jerusalem. Many people ask the question, why did Jesus, the Son of God, have to die? Now that question probably has a lot of different responses, and if you would like to share your response to that question, feel free to write it in the comment section below. This week I had the opportunity to read a book from a mentor and friend of mine, the Reverend Earl Palmer, and it's titled Studies in John, an Intimate Gospel. And through reading that, I came up with my own response. Why did Jesus have to die? Because sin and death and evil are real. And they needed to be confronted, and they needed to be confronted head on. Now, this may not be comfortable or easy to talk about, but it is necessary. It is important. We are living in the midst of a pandemic where the number of cases continues to rise, where the death toll continues to mount, not only within this country, but especially within our very own state. Now, there will come a time when people will take an extensive review and analyze all the different steps that could have or should have been taken that could have either prevented this or not allowed it to get so out of hand and become so catastrophic. But the reality that we already know is this, is that warnings were heeded, and that those warnings were too often ignored by our politicians, by various news agencies, and by segments of the general public. And as a result, it continued to grow and grow, and now it feels as almost it is out of control. It is spread like wildfire. Now, why do I bring that uncomfortable truth up? Because too often we have the same misguided approach when it comes to the topics of sin and death and evil. We don't want to talk about them. We want to ignore them. We just hope that they'll go away. We hope that they won't impact our lives. Yet the reality is sin and death and evil are just as real as this coronavirus. Sin is a distortion of what is right or what is true. It is missing the mark, missing the intended mark of just going awry. Each and every day this happens in our lives. No matter how hard we try, somewhere along the way we miss the mark. And that is true not only in our lives, it's true throughout the world. And so because of that, we need forgiveness. Now, listen to what Dietrich Bonhoeffer says in The Cost of Discipleship. Why can't we forgive ourselves? Because we cannot confer that level of forgiveness upon ourselves. And so, like the many sacrificial offerings that were given for thousands of years on those Jewish altars, along came the perfect sacrifice. The Son of God, Jesus Christ, fully God, fully human, who was willing to lay down his life and to redeem our lives in a way that we could never do. And so that is why we refer to Jesus as our Redeemer, because he paid the price that we could never pay. How about evil? How would you define evil? Is it the absence or the opposite of good? Is it the presence of immorality and wickedness? I think evil is a little bit more challenging to define, but one thing's for sure, we know it when we see it. Where do you see evil in the world around you? Evil is something that needs to be confronted. If it's not confronted, if it's not addressed, then it will be like a cancer. It will continue to spread and grow and take life wherever it can. And so that is why Jesus confronted evil head on. And how did he do it? He did it through unconditional love, sacrificial love. Now, I'm going to talk more in a couple days on Easter about that love, about the power of that love. But for today, on the Good Friday, let us remember that on that cross, as an act of love, Jesus did confront and overcome evil. And so in confronting sin and evil, Jesus also confronted a reality that is in each and every single one of our lives: death. The reality that every single one of us is mortal, that every single one of us eventually is going to die. We see it right now with the mass graves that are being dug, that are being filled in way too fast, just an hour away from where we are. Perhaps you have seen it with a friend or a loved one who has already passed away because of COVID-19. Death is a reality that we are experiencing right now that is different than any other time in my or perhaps your lifetime. And so, yes, sin and evil and death is real, and we can't ignore it. And Jesus did not ignore it. He confronted it on that Good Friday. He confronted it head on. And so why did Jesus have to die? Because something had to be done. Someone had to do something. And so on this Passion Week, we remember that Jesus was in that Garden of Gethsemane praying desperately to his Heavenly Father, "Lord, is there any other way?" And then the response came back, "No. This is the only way, and you are the only person that can accomplish this." And so then he walked over to Judas and the Roman soldiers that had surrounded him, and he gave himself up. And he allowed himself to go through a sham trial. He allowed himself to be beaten and mocked and crucified in a way that we can't even imagine the pain and the suffering. We will never be able to comprehend that. But what we can do is be grateful that in doing so, Jesus overcame sin and death and evil. And that is something that we will celebrate in a couple days on Easter. But for today, we remember the sacrifice. We remember the reality that lies within each and every one of us and around the world. That sin and death and evil need to be confronted. And they were confronted, and they were overcome on Good Friday, in and through the life of Jesus Christ. Thank you for listening. I hope and pray that God continues to be with you and to protect you and to watch over you. I look forward to being with you in a couple days on a joyful Easter morning.